I know what you're thinking. A record store owner talking about how terrible Spotify is? Of course. Well, to that I want to say we're merely asking the question whether Spotify does, in fact, F over musicians. And I have to say, the answer is not as black and white as you might think. So I still feel compelled to start with a little disclaimer. Yes, I do own a record store. Yes, I do love records. But also, I'm a Spotify subscriber. I had a subscription for quite a while, and I use it every single day. I use it for my personal enjoyment, discover a lot of music with that, because you can't always have all the records that you would like to have, even though I prefer listening to records if I have the choice. Well, for one, again, I'm a record store owner, so I don't have the money to buy all the records I would like to have, but also they're not always available. But that's not the point. What I'm trying to say is I'm definitely not against Spotify as an idea, but what I wonder is how is it for artists? So we want to get a little closer to the answer to that question. All right, so first of all, how did Spotify start? Well, the company was founded in 2006. It was launched in 2008, and then big milestone, 2011, they entered the US market. And it has been quite the story. They completely changed the music industry. Because when they first started out, well, the music industry was in shambles. You might recall, after the glorious 90s, internet came along. With the internet came downloads, mostly illegal and, keyword, free. And basically people stopped paying for music. They preferred just downloading stuff for free, stopped buying physical albums, just like Lars Ulrich predicted. Just saying. Anyway, Spotify came in with the idea, hey, if we can't get people to pay for their downloads, which was what the music industry was still trying to somehow achieve, well, maybe if we get them access to pretty much all music there is out there for a relatively small fee a month, at least we get a little something. A little bit is better than nothing, right? Yeah, it did completely change the game. Fast forward to today, well, what we're looking at right now is a music industry that is doing much better than it did at the time of Spotify's founding. We're now back to, we're actually at a US total revenue for recorded music of $15 billion for 2021. That is technically a record year, even surpassing 1999, which was the best year for the recorded music industry before that. Now, of course, we have to adjust for inflation, so if we do that, still about 37% down, but it's going up, and it has been going up for quite a few years now. And streaming is by far the biggest part of it. About 83% of that revenue came from streaming, and Spotify is the biggest player. They accumulate roughly 30%, a little over 30% of the total streaming market share. Behind that comes Apple Music and Amazon Music, both roughly half of that share percentage. They had 182 million subscribers at the end of quarter 1 2022, about 418 million active users, and their market value is at about $20 billion. Now, of course, they're a stock company, so that can go up and down like crazy, but big numbers. So how does Spotify pay the artists that made them so big, that actually are the core of their business model? So it's actually a little complicated. There is not that magic number, the magic dollar amount per stream that you might see when you go online and Google the topic a little bit. No, they do what is called a stream share. So basically, all the money that Spotify makes, they take, of course, some money to, well, pay their employees, get that cool little app going, and so on. Get a little bit further into that later. But they come up with an amount that they actually pay out to the creators, or maybe we should better say the holders of the copyrights of those music titles. Well, how much do they pay for that? Well, the thing is, basically, you have a big pool of money, but within that pool of money you have a bunch of little buckets for different countries, different types of subscriptions. All those are a little different. But if we just totally simplify it, let's say just random numbers, Spotify pays out $1 million this month, and you had a super big hit song, you made 1%. You were responsible for 1% of all those streams on Spotify. Well, in that case, you would get $10,000 from Spotify. Seems actually relatively simple. But how is that per stream? Again, there is not an exact number, but if you kind of boil it down from the different sources that we've been researching at, you can come up with a rough number of maybe about half a penny per stream. Again, this can be different every month. It's different from country to country. But if we're going by that assumption that it's roughly half penny, that would mean you would need about 1,000 streams to make $5. To get to US minimum wage of roughly $15,000 a year, which of course is a laughable number in itself, but a different topic, you would have to rake up about 3 million streams. To get to the rough US average income a year of about 50,000, you would have to come up with about 10 million streams. So that is a lot of streams that you would have to come up with. Now, just as a little side note, is it better to buy records? Let's see. Well, Karen Kelleher, founder and president of Gold Rush Vinyl, came up with this calculation. Of course, have to be a little careful with that, but she's saying it takes about 368,000 streams on Spotify to make the same amount as selling 100 vinyl albums. Well, again, even if we're really careful with that, even if she's half off, that would still mean you would have to over 1,000 times stream that particular album to make the artist the same amount of money as just buying it. And how many albums do you really listen to 1,000 times? Again, this is just a little side note. That whole comparison might be an interesting topic for another video. But so, we see now that you need to have a lot of streams to make money. But then, here's the next thing. Spotify doesn't pay the artists directly most of the times, which is not really their fault. They pay whoever owns the rights, the label, and so on. So that means they, of course, take money off of that too. So that money doesn't actually come directly to the artists. And then we get into label contracts. Well, what type of contracts do they have? Of course, there's a million different examples, but what actually is still pretty common is that the labels pretty much take still the same percentages as they did 20, 30 years ago when most sales were still physical. At the time, that made a little bit more sense because, of course, there was a lot of costs involved with actually producing the physical media that needed to be produced to get to the customer. It had to be distributed. The record stores need a little cut too. I'm sorry, we got to pay rent too. So with that being gone, at least for the streaming portion, that might be actually another thing to consider. Maybe the labels need to be a little more fair to their artists in their compensation plans. Again, that's another topic, but all that comes into play. Now, how does Spotify stack up against their competitors? We're talking about Spotify mainly here because they're the biggest one. They basically invented streaming, more or less. But they're the biggest player in the business. Well, you might have seen this graphic that T-Pain posted a little while ago, in which he showed how many streams it takes to make $1 on the different streaming services, and Spotify looked pretty bad on there, even in comparison to some really big players like Apple Music, Amazon Music, and so on. Now the thing is, most of those streaming services actually have a very similar model as Spotify, that whole stream share model. Now the thing is, of course, the more streams you have, the more songs are actually actively being listened to, well, the lower that per stream number gets. Because of course, if you have a subscriber that pays those $10 or so a month, but only listens to one song that month, well, you're still getting $10 from that subscriber. But then the other subscriber, he might listen to 1,000 titles that same month, but you're still getting the same amount. So of course, the more individual listens, the smaller the actual per stream payout. So that is sometimes not so fair. That is maybe why we have Tidal often reported as having much better per stream payouts. This might actually explain a lot of that, because they simply have way less subscribers, way less streams. So question is Spotify paying out enough? Is that pool that they're paying actually enough, or are they just making big old profits on the back of the musicians? Well, is Spotify profitable? Not really. Total revenue of Spotify in 2021 was about $10 billion. The payout they're claiming was about $7 billion. So the loss that they actually had in 2021 was about $38 million. They have never really been continuously profitable. Now, of course, the question is, well, are they not profitable because they're just paying such crazy salaries to their executives or other people, and the bottom line number looks like that? Well, that is actually kind of difficult to get reliable information on how much they're really paying the big shots in the company. But maybe we can get a little idea when we look at Daniel Ek, the CEO and co-founder of Spotify. Well, Bloomberg estimates his net worth at about $2.6 billion. That was in a report from a few months ago. And that was actually after he reportedly lost roughly $1 billion in about a month because the stock price of Spotify went down so much. Well, that was the whole Rogan thing. You might remember that. That's a different topic as well. But that shows us people are actually making a lot of money off of Spotify, even though they're not really a profitable company. So that makes you think, maybe there should be a little bit of a bigger pool for the artists. Well, but if we're staying with that, as Spotify not being super profitable, well, what could increase that pool? Well, of course, more subscribers, more money coming in from customers. So first thing they could do is maybe increase the subscription prices. Well, it's actually kind of interesting. Spotify's subscription price has been pretty much the same for quite a while. In the meantime, companies like Netflix, for instance, they have continually gone up. Well, the thing about that is it's actually kind of hard for Spotify to do that, probably because they're competing with very, very similar streaming services. If you think about it, Apple Music, Amazon Music, they have pretty much the same stuff. So if they go up with their prices, people will probably just cancel the subscription and get pretty much the same thing elsewhere. So that might not really be an option. Another option might be, well, more subscribers. Is there potential for that? Well, as we saw initially, they had 418 million active users, but only 182 million subscribers at the end of Q1 in 2022. So that means they're actually struggling a little bit to get people to full unsubscribe and not use the free ad-supported version. But globally, there is probably still quite a bit of potential. Just to give you an idea, the total recorded music revenue globally was about 25 billion last year. 15 billion was in the US alone. there's definitely much more potential out there. So that might be a way to do it. Well, what are the other strategies? Well, Spotify has been very active in the podcast business in the last few years, and the big reason why is probably because they can basically get that in upfront and it becomes their own content, so they don't have to pay out as much royalty because the margins are so difficult in the music, on the music side of things. So is that good or bad for musicians? Well, of course, when you see the crazy numbers that are thrown at guys like Joe Rogan, you might think, how is there not more for musicians? But could it maybe help them by increasing the total pool? That remains to be seen. And that brings us to the last thought of this video. Well, where is the future of streaming going? Well, we might think in a way, hey, the music industry figured it out, now they're making money off of streaming, everything's good for them, so it will probably stay like that. But hey, when you look back how different things are right now than they were 10 years ago, 10 more years, most likely things will not stay the same. Stuff is constantly moving. And so one of the things that I think is interesting is, like we said, all those streaming services have very, very similar products basically to offer, and they're in themselves not really profitable. The same goes for Apple Music, Amazon Music, but they're backed by major companies with lots more revenue sources, so Spotify might actually be kind of in trouble. What can they do? Can they maybe become their own content holders like they do in the podcast business, basically becoming a label? Or will the labels at some point say, well, you know what, we can be our own streaming service and come up with Universal Music or Sony Music, whatever. The big labels might get into the streaming business themselves directly. And the question is, will it stay like that, where you have many different services with basically the same content, with almost all content all together, or will it be divvied up like we have it in the TV world, where if you get a Netflix subscription, you get this set of shows, with your Hulu subscription, you get this, with your HBO that, and so on. And we end up having to subscribe to a bunch of different streaming services. It's interesting. I don't know where it's gonna go, but I think we're probably gonna be in for big changes in the future. So back to our initial question: does Spotify F over musicians? Well, it's really not that black and white. It's pretty complicated. We can definitely say Apple and Amazon are not super good guys here. Spotify might not be a good guy either, but we have to think somewhere the money has to come from somewhere to be paid out to musicians, and at least Spotify actually found a model that is definitely better than illegal downloads that totally ruined the industry for a while. A little bit is better than nothing, I guess. Well, we would like to hear what you have to say about that. What do you think? Is Spotify good or bad for musicians overall? Where is all this streaming going to in the future? What is your personal take on it? Join our conversation, and while you're at it, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. We'll see you all next week. Thanks for watching.